Thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Healthcare podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for us to chat.
Excellent.
I'd love if we could just get things started. If you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. Todd Latz, I'm the CEO at GoHealth Urgent Care, and I've spent almost the last 2 decades in healthcare. Got my start as a transactional attorney, but really fell backwards into healthcare and couldn't be happier about it. I can't see myself leaving healthcare now. I love the way that we're able to disrupt, certainly in the new healthcare models, an industry that needs to be more consumer focused. And that's what we have been really targeting with GoHealth Urgent Care.
Did you always envision that you'd be going into the urgent care space? What was it that really drew you in from the start? And then obviously you've been at GoHealth now for a couple of years, I think approaching seven years about.
That's exactly right.
What were some of the things that kind of drew you to this space, and why did you want to even join GoHealth, I guess?
So, Jared, I got my true start in healthcare in a diagnostic imaging business that I ultimately led. And what I really liked about that business was the ambulatory nature of it. You know, if you look at the progression of healthcare, if you went back, a couple of decades, it was very acute facility focused, right? Focused on the health system and larger IDNs, integrated networks. And I really liked this notion of ambulatory care where we were getting closer to the patient. The patient was better able to make some of their own consumer-oriented decisions and focused on greater access and lower cost. But one of the things in the imaging business that I didn't find as intriguing was this nature of there being a gatekeeper, whether that was an insurance company or something else that kept the healthcare provider from getting really closer to that patient, to being the tip of the spear from a consumer-oriented standpoint. And that's one of the things I really liked in the early days about urgent care. I'd watched it from afar, and I loved the fact that it was at the intersection of retail consumer approaches to healthcare. And you had this sort of self-effectuating, self-activating notion of a patient deciding when and where they wanted to access care and being able to meet that need. And so that piece was really intriguing to me. And what I loved about the GoHealth model was from the early days, it was purpose-built to partner. And so this notion of partnering with large health systems or other large providers in the healthcare space who bring to bear a number of huge advantages. And we'll probably get into a little bit more around this in a moment about our unique model. But what I really liked about GoHealth was this notion of taking a nimble, entrepreneurial, for-profit minded organization, pairing that up with these large not-for-profit health systems that have so many benefits in what they do, so connected into their communities, and essentially taking a 1 + 1 = 3 or 4. So taking the best of both of those worlds and being able to really build a differentiated model.
Yeah, thank you for sharing too. I always find it really interesting. Very rarely do I have a bad story when I ask that question, because you wouldn't be at the company, right? If you didn't have something that really drew you into it. So I appreciate that. I'd like to kind of segue into, you alluded to it just a moment ago, and we were talking about it even before we started recording, this, what you described as on-demand care. Can you describe that in more detail for us? I guess what it means to you, what it means to GoHealth, and how you're executing on that?
Absolutely. So we think of it, the GoHealth model, as a true on-demand, care-centric platform that serves as both the physical and digital front door to the healthcare ecosystem in our communities. And the way we do that is through true joint venture partnerships with large health systems. So today, every one of our 160 centers from coast to coast is in a true equity joint venture with a prominent health system. And we think about this model, Jared, in terms of bringing to bear our customer focus, our technology-enabled platform, and our data-driven decision-making. And we pair that up with our health systems and the benefits that they have in the market. And that's clinical expertise, really deeply rooted in their communities, leading presence, and the comprehensive care networks. And so together we've built a really connected care model. And we set out from the very beginning to solve a number of the challenges that we saw in healthcare. And you're quite familiar, I'm sure, as most of the listeners will be with this. So, rising and constantly high costs, at lack of access, fragmented delivery system, and typically really low patient satisfaction scores. And so what we've built in our connected model, our GoHealth model, is something that we believe solves for all of those: a connected omni-channel experience that enhances access. It increases quality through that connectivity with the health system. We're lowering cost, and then we're delivering great patient experiences, as evidenced by our mid-80s NPS scores.
Mid-80s. Wow, that's very good. Wow. Okay. And was this something new that you decided to really dive into, like on-demand care, or is this something that has been kind of part of your mindset at GoHealth for, I mean, you've been there, like we said, 7 years, right? Was this the mindset from day one, or was it something new over the last 2-3 years?
Yeah, so I would say the answer to that is really yes to both. So really was the notion, Jared, from the very beginning to be something more than just urgent care and move into this on-demand space. But if you think back 6-7 years ago, so when I first came to the organization, we were still very small. So just had 7 locations when I started, and we've grown it, as I mentioned previously, to 160. And so over time, the notion was always to expand that concept into a true on-demand, and we would say omni-channel experience. And what I mean by that is both virtual and brick and mortar. And so we had that pre-COVID. We've been doing virtual for a number of years. We certainly over the past several years have accelerated that innovation and done that with the support of our technology platform. But we think about a frictionless, a seamless experience for our patients. And that begins before they ever come to our center. So that's our customer acquisition tools or our queuing system, the fact that we have a proprietary online registration system we call GoReg. So giving patients the ability to access care on their terms, where they want it, when they want it, how they want it. And we think of this omni-channel on-demand delivery platform as something where a patient could start in a virtual context, end up in brick and mortar, maybe finish that visit virtually, or the reverse. They could start by coming into one of our physical centers. Let's say 6, 8, 10 people show up at once. We can triage that, understand which patients can be handled appropriately in a virtual context, and they could go to an exam room in one of our centers, but virtually interface with a provider that's across town. All of our virtual is done by our own clinicians in our model. Or they could go back to their car or go home and do that conveniently as well. And so we've always had this in mind of what this model was going to look like, but the evolution over the past several years has really accelerated what we wanted to be able to do to get closer to our consumer, and again, to take the friction out of the system.
Was any of that also accelerated by the start of the pandemic last year, or did you feel you were in a pretty good position even before the start of the pandemic to address some of obviously the major issues that it brought?
It's a great question, Jared. So I would say we were well positioned prior. So we had a virtual care platform. It's always been customized for us. So it is really interwoven in our customized workflows in our center. You can see behind me, this won't help for listeners if they haven't been in a GoHealth center before, but you can even see from the center footprint. So we have a smaller concept, smaller box concept, but very open and transparent, technology enabled. So that's true for our clinicians. Our patients are roomed really quickly. Our providers chart in front of the patient so they can be interactive in their care. So all of those pieces were there, including the virtual piece beforehand. But what happened in the pandemic is it really accelerated up that innovation. So if we think about what our strategy was, for the next 18 months when the pandemic hit, we did a lot of that probably in 18 days, meaning we just launched things that we had been preparing to roll out, given the nature of what was going on, right? When people were locked down, when care needed to be delivered almost, predominantly virtually. But for us, it was never, and it never has been, just one thing. It's that connected care model across the omni-channel spectrum, because we served as the front line for the pandemic for most of our partners. And it really doubled down for us with our health system partners on this model, where we acted as that true front line, caring for patients, trying to keep them out of the acute facilities to protect the EDs of our partners and in our community and the hospitals as well. And so it really accelerated up what we were doing, and where we have seen, I think, in primary care and specialty care, you saw a big spike in the use of virtual, obviously, right, in the early days of the pandemic, but a lot of that has come back down, and now it's back more to the typical way it was done before, certainly virtual at a higher rate than it was previously to the pandemic, but still at a pretty low level. We haven't seen that. So we've seen a really consistent utilization of the virtual channel, and we've done that through innovations of how to better care for our patients and to enable them, again, to get care how, when, and where they want. So if they want to start in a virtual channel, if they want to do the registration, the evening before, they can handle a lot of what would happen in person and make that interaction even more effortless for them. And we continue to take that focus on the patient, on our customer, and build and design workflows and technology around that.
Can you share some of the things that you're really excited about as we head into the second half of 2021 as it relates to GoHealth?
Absolutely. I think for us, it's really this greater opportunity now to leverage a true on-demand care platform, right? You've had this awakening or this realization from so many patients and healthcare consumers here that previously either hadn't gotten to that trial phase, or they thought maybe the experience would be different in person versus virtual, or for those who might have tried a telehealth option or a virtual, we've always thought about that as having a bit of a last mile problem. There are certain things, obviously, that you can handle from a virtual perspective, but then again, in-person care is a big component of it. And so most virtual only or predominantly virtual platforms don't have the ability to conveniently treat a patient if they need to be seen in person. And so we love this opportunity going forward of exercising this true omni-channel opportunity where patients can move from a virtual to a physical experience. It's still the same visit. They're only registering once. It's the same financial transaction from an insurance or a payer perspective. So one copay versus this disjointed, model that we've had historically, where a patient might have started virtually, and if they couldn't continue that experience, if it couldn't be handled just in a virtual world, now they don't know where to go next, right? It's not connected, and that's what we've done with our great health system partners from coast to coast, whether that's on the East Coast, Northwell Health, Hartford Healthcare, Novant Health, Christiana Care. We're in the Midwest with Mercy, and then on the West Coast with Legacy Health and Dignity Health, Common Spirit, and we're able to work together with those health systems to try to solve some of these larger problems as healthcare moves further away from these acute facilities. And so I'd say that's the next thing I'm really excited about, is the movement to at home. So this is something we've been talking about as a team, and we have the benefit of an amazing team that's really focused on these things, and that's care moving into the home. And it's something the pandemic has really highlighted as well. More screening, more testing, more ability, we believe, going forward for people to engage in their own healthcare starting in the home, but you still have that connectivity issue, right? You might be able to go into a drugstore and buy a test, but if the result is inconclusive or it's positive, you still have that same what's next problem, right? Where do I go for that next level of care? And whether that's virtual or in person, we're playing a really dynamic role there. And if it's something more serious, given the connected nature of our model with health systems, we can get you same day or next day appointments with specialists. We can put you into a primary care model if it's something chronic that needs to be managed, more comprehensively. And so we're really excited about that. I would add maybe two more things to it if I've got a little bit more time, which is direct to employer. That's been a big growth channel for us, certainly something we've done from day one, but really accelerated over the past year and a half. And then value-based care. We deploy value-based care initiatives in every one of our markets around the country. That's something that really took a bit of a pause during the pandemic, which is disappointing for all of us who believe that this is really the future of healthcare. But we're excited in 2021 to get that back on track, where the focus can be less on the absolute, acute and traumatic nature of COVID-19, and we can move more to this longitudinal value-based care concept. So I'd say DTE and value-based care, certainly there. And then we're always excited about healthcare consumers taking more control of their healthcare future, thinking about health and wellness. And we think this movement to on-demand care really enables our healthcare consumers to make those choices for themselves. And we're excited about that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on, and I agree with you that a lot of people do have that problem of what's next, and we're seeing care come to the home at. It seems like care at home is becoming more and more the norm, right? And years ago, it wasn't, and there's obviously some things that still need to be improved there for it to be a seamless experience. But it's nice to know that you've really taken that approach of what's next and how can we help them with what comes next so that they can have a seamless experience. So thank you for all that you and the GoHealth team are doing. I know everyone appreciates it.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to hopefully being able to have you and other members of your team on again to talk about different issues happening in the urgent care space and healthcare in general, and wish you all the best.
Great. Thanks so much, Jared. It's a dynamic space, and we're excited to keep pushing forward.